this is the last full week all the teams play. And after that, it starts spreading out. All the championship weekend, the bowl season, which is always a lot of fun, but it's not quite the same. So we have one more hectic Saturday and a little bit of a hectic Friday. Friday's always been a lot of fun.
Yep.
It's a great week for college football, but it's also a little sad.
Yeah, it is sad. And I was talking to Miss Cousin Jared about this tonight, and I was like, yeah, tonight's or this week is the last week of the full games. It's the last week of talking about 60 however many games there might be this week. She was like, oh, so it's over, and I was like, well, no, then we've got conference championship weekend, and then we've got however many bowl games there are now, 30-something bowl games to talk about. So this is the end of the large college football content, I would say, but there will still be content going forward with the games next week and then all 30-something bowl games, which I'm sure we will cover the majority of, probably every single one at some point. So
somewhere, yeah, we'll figure that out, whether it's on an extended cut or not. Because Jared, recap of last week, the last few weeks been going real well here. We all plays 13% ROI. We're slowly working that back up. A grade sides, though, continue to chug along. 104 wins, 101 losses, more dogs than favorites, which is why the ROI is 2% of there. And then every total that we've given out that we have had an analysis on, whether it's on this show or over on TikTok/Instagram for the total of the day, 8% ROI on the season. Last week we went a tidy little 4-2, and we only went 4-2. We should have went 5-1. We had on show, we gave out Akron and Eastern Michigan under, and that game went under in regulation. Then we got overtime, which is going to happen, unfortunately. But definitely another situation where we felt really good about the read, and then it just, sometimes, you got the right idea and the wrong thing happens.
Yep. And you gotta remind yourself that sometimes you're on the right side and still lose. And that was one of those where we were on the right side and still lost. And sometimes that's just how it goes.
It's just the way it is. Been a good college football season here for us so far. Excited to get into the bowl season, which we destroyed last year. And I think the player-based model is going to really help us out there as well, being able to take out players who are sitting out, so we won't be quite as guessing on what the line should be. We'll have a model that tells us what it is, which will be good. Here's our slate of games that we're going to cover, Cousin Jared. 4 Friday games, 5 Saturday games, and viewer, if you're not with us over on YouTube, there is a play for Tuesday that I already sent out to the Discord. I don't know if it'll make a total of the day Tuesday. We'll get to that when we get there. I don't know what college basketball happened. Maybe we'll do one of each. I don't know. I don't know what the number will be. But this is one where I told everyone on the Discord, I said, run, don't walk, because there's total I love on Tuesday. There's an A-grade play that you got to love for Tuesday as well. And so if you're interested in that, the sign up for Dub Club, that link is in the show description. If you're with us on YouTube, there's the QR code and a promo code you can use for $5 off your first month. Cousin Jared, between all the A-grade picks in college basketball, college football, and just all the NFL stuff, it seems like, your subscription would pay for itself.
Yep.
And I appreciate those who are with us supporting me while I do this. Too many hours of the week, much to Mrs. Professor's chagrin at this point,
Yeah. Well, we all appreciate the work that you put on this for sure.
We'll get started here Friday at noon. Ohio and Akron. I mean, Ohio has been just a phenomenal transformation from last year, turning into a defensive first team, despite Rourke, and how fantastic he was last year.
Yep.
The pace has really slowed down. They are taking everybody under, dragging those games down. Akron kind of already touched on it with them playing Eastern Michigan. A terrible offense, but a pretty solid defense. They have no interest in going fast. Ohio should be able to control the pace of this game. Akron will have no objections. The defenses are much better than the offenses. That's why the model projects 32.6. Under 41 is a play here. Cousin Jared, I feel like given the keenness of 41, this is one to lock in sooner rather than this is a run, don't walk. Get it now.
Yes, I completely agree with that assessment. This is something you want to grab sooner rather than later. First of all, an 11 a.m. Central kick the day after Thanksgiving. Who wants to do anything the day after Thanksgiving? I mean, let's be honest. These guys are still going to be stuffed from whatever wonderful meal I'm sure is provided by the team the night before. Nobody wants to get up and do anything. Everybody's going to be a little lackadaisical. Everybody's going to have a little bit of an issue kind of getting the blood pumping first thing on Friday morning there. But the reality is, you mentioned kind of about Ohio, how they have become a defensive first team and just have managed to take every game into a low scoring affair this season. And I don't think Akron is going to complain about that, because Akron is one of the worst offensive teams in college football. And I don't expect that to turn around here in the last week of the season. So this is one of those things where Ohio's strength is defense this season. Very different than what we thought it would be coming into the season, but definitely a defensive first team. And Akron is a non-offensive team. And so I feel like this is just a perfect way to cap off the last full week of the regular season by going under a low number here. And, there have been times where you get numbers like this where you're like, 41, that's pretty low. Do we really want to go under that number? In this instance, yes. These are two teams that will be more than happy to play a game that ends somewhere in the mid-30s.
Yeah, both Akron and Ohio individually have played, 70-80% or so of their games under, and the exceptions have been where they've just been so good, they've dominated, they've been so bad, they've been dominated, or double overtime. And that doesn't really apply here. Ohio's the better team, absolutely, and they should win this game. There's a reason why they're about a 2-touchdown favorite. But they're, they shouldn't put up, 50 points themselves, which is a thing that can happen, of course, to Akron. But Ohio's not the team to do that. Right. Because they've just become such a defensive first team, one of the top 25 defense. Yeah. From the start of the season, we were confused, and then it just never went away. It just consistently stayed good.
We kind of kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, kept waiting, and it just never happened.
It just never happened. The weather in this one right now looks fine. Obviously, we are a long ways away from kickoff on this one, so the weather could get worse, and if so, that only helps us. Right. Of course, for right now, though, it does look like it'll be cold, but that won't really have much of an effect, tracking mid-30s. No real threat of rain or wind. So fine weather, just two teams that are going to go slow and, like you said, play more defense than offense.
And I can't remember if we talked about it specifically here on YouTube, but you'll notice we haven't taken any overs the past few weeks here, and it's exactly for that reason you mentioned the weather. The weather could make a game more low scoring. The weather's never going to make a game more high scoring. So anytime you like an under, I'm usually fine with grabbing it early in the week. Is if you don't have any key number considerations there, fine grabbing it early in the week. If you want to play any overs, I definitely recommend, especially this time of year, just wait and wait till you get at least 48 hours, maybe at least 3 days out from the game, and see what the weather says, because you'd hate to make an overplay right now and then some weather system come in and you're like, oh man, wish I hadn't made that play.
And I think a great example of that is Oregon State Washington, which was setting up to be a fun, high scoring game, and it was still a fun game, and it was kind of fitting for that, for some of the rivalries of the Pacific Northwest, right? But it just wasn't the same sort of game that it could have been, with Oregon State's offense being better than their defense, and Washington's, of course, offense being much better than their defense. But it turned into windy and wet, and you saw it with I think there were back-to-back plays with fumbles. If it wasn't that, it was like within 3 or 4 plays, and so it just turned into this messy game. And I sent that message out to the Discord Saturday morning. I said, here's your weather spots, people, and there were only a couple. That was one of them. And so, but you don't really have a great idea about that, and so it's a great reason. Right. Otherwise, the over would have looked enticing in that game, but once you saw that weather, it was like, I don't know if it'll go over. I can't play it because the weather is so nasty. Yeah. Also on Friday, speaking of unders, Iowa and Nebraska, there's a reason this total is set at 27.5, folks. We are there. We have reached the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. There is nowhere else to go when you have a college football game that has a total of 27.5. I mean, this is it, right?
Yep, this is it. And I think we're both here to tell you, go under. I don't think there's any way you can play the over in this game.
No, in fact, I've already personally taken the under. It's not. I mean, an official pick. We are too far away in the weather, but right now it does look like maybe we might have a little bit of wind. Way too far to really know. But if there is any wind in this, it's going to make it even funnier.
And did you say 27.5?
27.5. Get the hook. Get the win on 27, which I guess 27 has to be a key number. There are no key numbers here because there's no one finishes here, but 27 would be a key number in theory, right? Based on what we know about how key numbers work.
Well, my friend, it's already down to 27. So yeah, well, there you go.
Well, if benefit of being on Discord, we already told everyone there. We said, hey, go ahead and get under 27.5. All right, to get myself at that number. But total aside, because I think there's a little bit of value on that. And it's also kind of one of those once in a lifetime, we're going to sit our grandkids in our lap and tell them about this moment, lowest total in the history of college football, at least for now, and taking it under and seeing how it goes. But we're also here to tell you to take Iowa at minus 102. A great pick. Because, Jared, I don't know. We said this last week. Like, Iowa does the dumbest things and they win. And I don't know what else to say other than they've got 9 wins this season. And I'm not sure how many of them. I mean, I think they kind of like dominated. Was it like Western Michigan or somebody?
Yep.
That's a bad MAC school, whatever. But like, otherwise, they just do what they do, which is prevent teams from scoring, and they just score enough somehow with enough random, like sometimes it's field goals, sometimes it's defensive touchdowns, sometimes it's safeties. I think they had a game where they had 2 safeties in it. Like you just never. And honestly, had it not been for the whatever weirdness of the punt return against Minnesota, you would have said punt returns, and they've had a couple of punt returns right for touchdowns, and that would have made them 10-1. And it's not like they're good, but they just keep doing the same thing. Here's the thing: Nebraska's an inferior version of Iowa. Their offense isn't any better. Their defense isn't any better. I've said it before. I am positive. As a Baylor alum, someone who saw what Matt Rule did, I'm optimistic for their future. Absolutely. But they're not a great team right now. They're a home team, but it's really all they have going for them. And Iowa just seems just so frustratingly, stubbornly going to keep doing what they're doing. And it keeps working. So here we are. Iowa minus 102, just like last week. It's disrespectful. This number should be a lot higher.
Yes, I agree that this number should be a lot higher. Especially, I want to focus in on the offensive side of the ball. And somehow, according to Sideline, Iowa has a better offense than Nebraska. I can't believe that those words are leaving my mouth. But Iowa has a better offense than Nebraska, according to Sideline. And a big part of that, I think, is that Jeff Sims still starting for Nebraska.
Yep.
And Deacon Hill, according to Sideline, Deacon Hill for Iowa, a better quarterback than Jeff Sims.
Almost competent. I don't know what word to use there.
Well, okay. I know as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I wanted to change it. I wanted to change what I said. Deacon Hill, a less bad quarterback than Jeff Sims. And so I think, like, how many games in a season does Iowa legitimately have, and we could say legitimately all we want, but how many games in a season does Iowa not at a disadvantage at the quarterback position? Yeah. It's not very many games. And I don't think that Iowa is at a disadvantage at the quarterback situation or at the quarterback position in this game.
And it honestly doesn't even matter. Chilla Purdy was the guy who played against Wisconsin. They've also, of course, had Sims playing a lot, and then they've had Harburg playing a lot, who I believe is still injured. Honestly, I don't know who they're going to go to, whether if Harburg comes back, if they're going to go to him, if they're going to go to Purdy or Sims or not. They're all the same. They're all and you've talked about, you have some coworkers who are Nebraska fans, and I think they were tired of Sims and they want to go to the other guys, but the other guys aren't better. I mean, they're all they're all really bad. And so it's like it doesn't even matter which one they're going to. We were talking about this before show. The model projected them for 17 points against Wisconsin. And so if you say Nebraska at 126, they're not that bad, right? Okay, the model thought they were bad last week, projected them for 17 points, and they scored 17 points in regulation. And the fact that they didn't score in overtime actually means they underperformed. Yeah. Right. So it's not like there's a lot. And again, that's one realization. So I'm not saying that proves the model right. I'm just saying you don't really have evidence to prove it wrong. Right. Like,
right. Exactly.
They've struggled on offense. It doesn't matter which guy's at quarterback. And Wisconsin's defense, not the Wisconsin defense of years past, going up against this Iowa defense is not going to be fun for them. This sets up to be a 12-10 game where Nebraska scores the only touchdown and loses a one-score game, because I swear we've seen this play out so many times in the last several many years. This game, it always ends the same. It seems like, and
100%.
And I don't really see anything different from these teams to tell me why this year would be any different. So I'm going on record, 12-10 Iowa. That's my prediction. Maybe that's too high, to be honest. I don't know.
Yep. And if the first half total is 13, go under that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You wouldn't have to try very hard to get me to go under 12.5.
I mean, that's how I was saying 10.5. I think it's I don't think I could go under 10, because at some point, like, a pick six or a punt return is going to do it for you. But like 10.5, like, probably I would still do it. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't go heavy on it. But first half under. Matt Rule's been that kind of guy for a long time now. And with these two teams involved, I mean, this is the pinnacle of unders, if that's your thing. To go under in this one. But also, we like Iowa. 68% chance to win makes even money just a fantastic proposition. Friday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern, Air Force and Boise State. My, oh my, how the turntables have turned. Boise State still alive for the conference championship game after firing their coach. They bench their starting quarterback.
Maddox, I think.
Maddox is the freshman.
Yeah.
Who comes in, gets hurt, is out for the season, go back to the starter that was, I believe, Taylor Green. Is that correct?
Taylor Green, yeah.
Taylor Green.
Yeah.
And interim coach, old quarterback, and Boise State is a win away from maybe making the conference championship. I'm not sure what sort of help they're going to need. The Mountain West is in a pickle with their conference championship situation, I believe, as the Big 12 is, where there's just a lot of teams, and who the heck knows how it's going to play out. Air Force has really struggled. We've talked about that. The quarterback issues with Larry are potentially playing hurt, then missing a game, not looking very good. That once dominant offense that really peaked in weeks, whatever it was, 4 through 7 or something, just completely falling by the wayside, losing at home to UNLV, a game where we had UNLV on that one and got the win there, and a fun back and forth game. UNLV looked great and terrible and great again. Now Air Force, needing to win here to hang on to their spot in the conference championship game. And again, maybe need help. I don't know. Models as these two teams are spot on, dead even. You can make a case that Boise is going up, Air Force is going down. I don't think that's crazy, but the model had Air Force in the top 25 at their peak and now has them down to 46. So the model is adjusted to how poorly they've continued to play, but we faded Air Force last week and got the winner. Now the model is telling us that the line movement is an overreaction and that Boise should not be favored by as much as they are. Plus 220 offers A-grade value. Model says 42%. If we get a 42% winner at plus 220, take that every day of the week and then some. Because of Jared, of all the A-grade plays, I'm curious what you saw in this one. I know you're a Mountain West guru, so enlighten us as to why this one's one of your favorites.
Well, whoever wins this game, both of these teams are 5-2 in the Mountain West. Whoever wins this game is going to have to wait to see who wins the UNLV San Jose State game. Because if UNLV beats San Jose State this week, the winner of this game will be in the conference championship game. If San Jose State wins, there will be a 3-way tie between UNLV, the winner of this game, and San Jose State. And two of those, got to figure out tiebreakers there. So anyway, whoever wins this game is going to be watching that other game closely on Saturday. So the reason that I picked this game is Boise going to Boise. They looked great last week, so they are destined to not look great in this game. And I think on a week getting ready for the triple option, I think this is where they would miss Andy Avalos, who was their head coach, but also
defensive guru.
Previously, a defensive guru, was a defense coordinator at Oregon, did good things there before he was the head coach here at Boise State. I would actually say, hey, that might be a name you want to watch out for the USC defensive coordinator job. So I think that Boise State is going to miss them. Boise State, like we said all season, as soon as they look good, they're going to turn around and look bad the next week. So this would kind of follow that pattern. But also historically, Air Force has played really well against Boise in the recent past. I remember a game where they went into Boise last year or 2 years ago, and I mean, they just absolutely took it to Boise. They only scored like 28 points, but it was one of those games where they scored 28 points, but Boise, I think, got like one stop in that game, and Air Force just ate clock. And so I think this
kind of reminiscent of wasn't it Air Force that played Washington State in that bowl game? And you can see Leach was just disgusted because that's what Air Force did. They got the ball like 5 times and scored 5 touchdowns, and that was it.
Yep, that was the entire game. So I think Air Force is going to be able to keep the ball away from Boise here, and I just think Boise is due for a letdown because that's what they've done. They have played well, let down, seemingly alternating every other week this season. And I mean, 100%, Air Force has not been playing well, but with a chance to play in the conference championship game on the line in this one, I think regardless, I think the game's gonna be close. So plus 220, I think it's just too steep odds for a game that's gonna be close and has so much on the line.
And a couple things to follow up on there. Number one, you said Boise's been doing this all season. They've been doing it for the better part of a decade now. There's just been no consistency to this team. You can't figure them out, and so you just kind of just zig and zag with them, and that works pretty well if you just do that. But the follow-up point to that is Air Force potentially figured it out a little bit last week, even though they lost. I mean, I think it's possible that loss to UNLV is being viewed as Air Force is still really struggling. But what if UNLV is just a solid team? I mean, the model has really come around on them. And we weren't very high on UNLV early on. We basically we said they played nobody, right? Yeah. And prove it to us. And then sure enough, they have. And that's what we always talk about, right? To be a successful sports bettor, number one, math. That's just the number one thing is you got to be able to do the math or find someone who's the math because it's a math problem. And if you're not finding the right prices and the right value, it's just not going to work for you, period. Yeah. But number two is you need to be able to adjust your opinion and not stay on the same opinion. And that's why we have the model, because the model helps us do that, helps us overcome our biases where we try to get stuck in our ways. And we weren't high on UNLV and the model was high on them. And now that is, okay, well, now we can, we can change our opinion. We don't have to stick with the same opinion every single week as we learn new data. And UNLV continues to look really good. And so I'm wondering if, Air Force at home, still you'd think pull it up, but it was a close game. And maybe that's just UNLV just having a magical season, well coached, and maybe that's not as bad of a thing on Air Force as possible. I'm like, this should be a close contest. You can take points if you want. We always talk about, do whatever works for you, but plus 220, just way too good to pass up. Friday night, I don't know off the top of my head. I guess I could look here. Historically here, there have been very few Friday night games. It looks like there's only 3 Friday night games. So usually there's not a lot happening here during the Friday night slate. And that makes it fun when you've got a big rivalry game like this. The other games at that time will be Texas Tech and Texas, which obviously a big rivalry game there. Penn State, Michigan State, which maybe you want to avert your eyes from. So maybe that game won't hit anymore. But Oregon State, Oregon, obviously a lot of fun here. Oregon trying to crack into the top 4, seemingly the same top 4 that we've had for centuries. And Oregon trying to do their darndest. I think this is the closest any team has come to cracking the top 4, top 5 if we go back enough years to throw Clemson in there, because Clemson was the other team that was able to do it. So your top 5 your top 4 have not been your top 3 have not been occupied by anybody other than those 5 teams: Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, and Alabama have been the only ones to occupy that spot for a long time. Oregon, they're not there yet. There's still a gap with them at number 5, but they are maybe as close as anybody's reasonably come. I love what they're doing. They're playing great football. That defense, we talked about it all season. Look at that defense, ranked number 13. It is a very underrated defense. It's part of the reason why we loved the USC-UCLA unders, because we said, hey, USC's played better defenses like Oregon. They slowed them down. And sure enough, UCLA was able to slow them down. So this Oregon defense is legit. Offense, obviously legit. So many playmakers. Nobody would ever doubt that. Oregon State, though, surprising to most people, offense number 6. Don't let that game in the rain fool you. It's still a very good offense. Still a good defense, too. The model thinks that's the weakest part of this Oregon State team, but we saw it last year. You never know in this game exactly what's going to happen. Oregon State just was able to manhandle Oregon last year. And honestly, you have to imagine Dan Lanning, a defensive guy, used this game from a year ago, all offseason, to say, guys, we cannot let this happen. And kudos to him. I think if that was the game plan, he's done a great job. Obviously, I'm not breaking news, right? I think he's done a great job. But he did a great job getting the defense into shape using this game from last year. Oregon State's still a really good team. I've got them number 13. They do have 3 losses, but I mean, the fact that they lost the game that last week in those conditions, and a close game that they had the ball at the end, that's just, we thought it would be a good tight game.
Yeah.
And it was a game on the wrong side. Kind of think the same thing here. Oregon should be favored, but maybe not by 14. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways that Oregon State loses this game, and I do think it's much more likely they lose the win. There's a lot of ways they lose, and plus 14 covers. Mm-hmm. Be a great pick for us, Kiss and Jared. It's just a lot of points in a rivalry game where both teams are actually good.
Yeah, I definitely, I think that highly qualifies that both teams are actually good in this game. So first of all, Oregon State, I completely agree with what you said. I am not holding that close loss to Washington against them in any way, especially under the circumstances with the weather and everything. Oregon State has 3 losses this season.
And I just want to point out to that too, if that last drive goes differently, the whole narrative changes. And does that one drive really change how we should view the other 55 minutes of the game, right? The other 55 minutes of the game was a good tight game, which is what we expected, right? I mean,
Yep. Completely agree with that. Oregon State has 3 losses this season by a combined 8 points. 3 losses by a combined 8 points. I still think somehow this team is underrated, and getting 14 points. I understand that it's on the road, but it's on the road in a rivalry game that is going to be close. The past 4 games between Oregon and Oregon State, the largest margin has been 14 points. And so, you would push in that scenario.
And some of those were much weaker Oregon State teams.
Yes, that's exactly kind of where I was going with this. There have been multiple instances, so you could even say the past 4 years, Oregon State's been pretty well. Well, they would have covered or pushed in all of those games. But then going back, how many times have we seen a top 10 ranked Oregon team that should just absolutely put away an Oregon State team, and they kind of mess around and can't do it and barely win or get upset by Oregon State? It seems to happen fairly often. And so I think this Oregon State team is underrated. I think 14 points is way too many. Even in the games that Oregon State has lost this year, they have been absolutely competitive. I think that is going to be the exact same thing here. I think Eugene is an intimidating place to play, but if there's one team that's not going to be intimidated by that, I think it's going to be Oregon State. They know how to do that, and again have played fairly well there the past handful of years. So I love taking the 14 with Oregon State here. I think it's just way too many. With both teams still have something to play for and something to prove.
Yeah, and the last thing that I just want to say about this one, we did predict Oregon State on average. We said they would win by 7 last week, and we just have to, of course, remember, like we're always talking about, the faith that we have in our process and why we believe we offer a valuable service here is the confidence in the process and in the overall set of games, not in one individual game. But the fact that we said Oregon State by 7 and they lost by 2, I believe,
Yep.
1, 2.
Yep.
The 9-point error there is actually smaller than the average error of any specific given week, right? Because again, we're talking about an average projection. We can't be perfect. So the fact that missed by 9 wasn't crazy. If it missed by 40, maybe you say, hey, something was off by that, right? Or we say we have an extreme outlier, which is also possible. You never really know. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the reasons we talk about the better grades being more valuable, because we can miss by a little bit. We still have some cushion. Obviously, in this case, yes, we have Oregon by 9. If we miss this by 9, Oregon wins by 18, we lose the pick. Absolutely. Yeah. But the idea is that we can still miss by 4, which would be a reasonable thing to happen at 13, and win the pick. And if we miss the other way, we've won the pick. So that's where we're talking about the probabilities and the confidence we have here. Any one individual game, anything can happen. Not anybody. We knew that, some of those SEC teams this last week, we knew they weren't going to lose. But then you had Mississippi State, and you start start to question that. Right?
Yeah.
But some of the better teams, of course, we knew Alabama wasn't going to lose, right, et cetera.
Yeah.
We knew LSU wouldn't lose. So, but for the most part, there is an error to each individual game. We've preached that so we might be preaching the choir here, but I remember that's why we always talk about the confidence in the process, not any one individual game. Oregon might win this game by 21. They might win by 30. You see some rivalries that Washington State's a great example that for whatever reason, year after year, Washington's the better team, and it just seems like Washington just kicks the crap out of them. Yep. And even the upstart years, Washington State can't do it, but Oregon State can, in their down years, can hang around. And Oregon State has been a team historically that even when they've been way worse, even when Oregon's been worse, the difference has been bigger on Oregon State's side, as in Oregon State's been worse than this by more than Oregon's been worse than this. Right. And Oregon State can still hang in those games. Now, does that matter? Again, who won game? We don't know. Nobody knows. Anybody trying to sell you that is crazy. What we're saying here is 14 on average makes a good pick, and this is the process that is hopefully going to lead to another profitable week of picks. Moving on to Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern, the aforementioned UNLV Running Rebels and their dream season continuing in a San Jose State team that, because Jared, you and I have talked a lot about recently that we've been really high on. Lo and behold, look at those overall ratings, 33 for San Jose State, 34 for UNLV. That is insane. I would have never thought it that high. To adjust, and the model continues to adjust. Mm-hmm. They've also had, for the most part, relatively good injury luck. And that's the other thing to keep in mind here is that there are probably a lot of teams that are below them who've lost starting quarterbacks for the year, have multiple guys out, or a team like Syracuse who the injuries just completely derailed their season after a whatever it was 5-0 or 5-1 start or whatever. So there's that. But I mean, you've got two teams that are well coached we thought at the beginning San Jose State would be solid. Yeah. We knew they had a guy in Cordero who's been around for about 100 years, it seems. Yep. But I don't think anybody saw this. I mean, these are just hats off to both these teams. Mm-hmm. UNLV at home should be favored. But, I mean, this seems like a game that anything can happen, and it wouldn't surprise me. I'll take the 25th-year quarterback at plus 160, even though it's on the road. Don't know what's going to happen, so give me some plus 160, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at. The other thing is like I have to imagine that UNLV, the one team they did not want to see standing between them and a for sure shot in the conference championship game is San Jose State.
The other team playing insanely well right now.
Yes, that's just what I was about to say. San Jose State started out 0-2 in conference and has won 5 straight games. They have been playing unbelievable football as of recent. I mentioned it when UNLV played Wyoming. I said, if UNLV does to Wyoming what they've done to every other Mountain West team this year, then I will say, hey, I was wrong. UNLV is a good team, and I will admit that UNLV is a very good team. San Jose State is hot, and I am getting a hot team at plus 160. I like my odds there. So if UNLV wins this game, I will not be surprised. But plus 160 just feels too steep for a team that has been playing and has been on fire. I mean, look at that, number 33 overall. And I mean, you've got the offense is rated a little bit worse, but you've got Cordero at quarterback, which I think in a big game like this makes a little bit of difference. And then you've got a better defense than UNLV. So I think this is going to be a great game. Like this may be one of the games on Saturday that I'm most looking forward to.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that there's some value in this pick. Potentially the books are shading this number a little bit towards UNLV, knowing that they might get a little bit of that local action. I'm not sure if that's quite the case like it was before, but I will say we have seen this with the Golden Knights at times, and not that they have not been a great hockey team, but there's been times when there's been value picking your right spots against them. For similar reasons, there's still that Las Vegas still is the ecocenter of this. And even if you're with the offshores, there's still, it still all kind of affects each other in this from what I've seen. So there might be a little bit of value there. Might be a little bit of value in the records. People looking at the records, of course, UNLV played one tough non-conference game and of course got thumped by Michigan. There's no shame in that, other than last week. That's what has happened to them. Right. But San Jose State, despite some of those losses, like you said, has been playing. And both of these teams have. And I think that's kind of the key point. Both teams are playing incredibly well. If either one was on the road at the other one, I'd take plus 160 and say, great. Like, who the heck knows? Again, I think the UNLV is more likely to win than not. But this is the thing we have preached over and over and over and over again, that plus 160 in a game that's this close to a coin toss, even if it's not a true one, it's just too good to pass up. But I'm like you, I'm really excited for this game. Yep. And again, as always, if you want to take points. But otherwise, I think plus 160 on a team with a proven quarterback like that who won't be affected by going on the road, who's been battle tested playing the likes of, USC and Oregon State and someone else I thought was pretty good as well. Got a shot there to win. That's really all we can ask for with those odds.
Yep.
Speaking of Michigan and Maryland, that was an incredible game. Of course, Maryland, I don't really think ever had a chance, but they kind of had a chance, if that makes sense. They could never really get into it at the end, and they never really had great field position. And the safety maybe could have helped them if they could have kicked it off and got a stopping at better field position. But then they just gave good field position right back. But hats off to them for doing something that nobody else has done this year to Michigan. Because the model does not take into consideration that Maryland might be very physically beat up, the toll of that. But there might be even extra value in this pick because that might be the case. Plus 105 on Rutgers model thinks they should be favored, that this is being treated like a coin toss game, but Rutgers should actually be favored. What are your thoughts?
And if there's a team that is just going to say, hey, this team is a little beat up, let's beat up on them more, it's going to be Rutgers. I feel like that kind of falls right into their wheelhouse. If you asked me to tell you what Maryland has done the second half of the season, probably the three games that would have come to my mind are Ohio State, where they lost by 20, but they were within the number on that for a vast
until the very end.
Until the very end, they were within the number there. So I actually thought that they didn't play too poorly in that game. I remember the win at Nebraska because we sat here and said, hey, they're a better team than Nebraska, and Maryland is a poor man's Iowa. They kind of just beat every team that they should and lose the games that they should lose. So I remember that. And then, of course, the game last week against Michigan where, they played close and lost, but easily covered that game. But let's zoom out a little bit further and look at all of the other games in that same period. They lost to a bad Illinois team. They lost to Northwestern, which, Northwestern is probably not as clearly Northwestern is better than we thought they were going to be. But still, I think a game that Maryland expects to win. Got blown out by Penn State. And then we just talked about, when we talked about the Iowa game, how bad Nebraska has been. Maryland only beat Nebraska by 3 points. So for some reason, the games that I would have just selected in my head were probably the best games that Maryland has played the second half of the season. And then you look at the others and it's like, man, this Maryland team's still not very good. And you know what? I think last game of the season, coming off that big game against Michigan, playing at Rutgers, a Rutgers team that is just very steady, I would say. I like Rutgers here at plus odds. A little bit surprised that I'm getting plus odds with Rutgers at home. If you'd have told me this was like a pick 'em or something like that, I wouldn't have been surprised. So plus 105 on Rutgers, sign me up. I know some places you can get like plus 110, which would be even better. So make sure you shop around before you take Rutgers in this one. But yeah, I like Rutgers at home against Maryland, who just has played okay at times, but for me personally, there's been a lot more bad that I just seemingly have forgotten.
And, both teams 6 wins, both are obviously at this point bowl eligible. So I'm not saying that either team cares. Obviously, they both are going to play hard. But, there's not that like added desperation of like, we're going to bust out all our trick plays at this point. Maybe they do. I don't know. But both teams should be equally likely to do that as opposed to one team who's like, no, we don't need to bust that out. One team who does. I think that you said it really well. We've talked about that there's a hierarchy in the Big Ten, that you've got Penn State at the top of the we crush the teams we should but can't beat the teams that are better than us. Below that's Iowa. crush the teams that are not crush in the Iowa way, beat the teams worse than us, but can't beat the teams better than us. And then Maryland below that. And I think you see that in the ratings of them where, Penn State's like a top 10 team. And then, Iowa's like number 50 and then Maryland here at number 74. And I think that's the point is that Maryland is not really better than this Rutgers team. Neither one of these teams is that great. They both had some good moments and they both had some questionable moments. Both teams are just not great. The Big Ten is a conference, right? A lot of people talked about probably a little bit overrated. The two teams at the top are insanely good, but beyond that, what is there? And you'd make the same argument potentially about the SEC, right? Some of the teams at the top really good. Do they have quite the depth? It's a little bit tougher to say. And this is part of that depth, right? When you talk about the Kentucky struggling, right? Or Florida struggling now, especially without Mertz now, or South Carolina struggles. It's the same thing here with the Big Ten. Maryland and Rutgers kind of struggle. Some of these teams just being just very meh, they're not really that great. And that makes this where this team's at Maryland, maybe a little bit different story. But at Rutgers, it's like, why is Rutgers plus odds? Like this should be Rutgers like minus 115, minus 120. And then I'm like, sure. That's pretty close. I think the model with Juice would have actually made it a little bit higher, but I'd say sure, whatever, minus 150. And this number may get there. You never know where the line's going to go. If it gets to minus 115, I'd say sure. Don't play with that. You got to be value, but plus odds, enough value to be worth your being on your ticket for Saturday. Because we talked a lot about the teams, some teams today who've really impressed. Arizona, I mean, again, we had them as an A-grade pick. Love them last week, and they took care of business against a Utah team that was probably overrated. Now they get to play rival Arizona State, an Arizona State team who, again, I'm high on in the future. They've just had so many injuries. They've really struggled offensively, but defensively, they're pretty stout, relatively speaking, at least. But Arizona, my goodness, I mean, you just cannot talk enough about that defense, which, again, not what we would have expected coming into the season.
Nope.
Pace-wise, kind of run-of-the-mill average, not what we expected in the season. We expected them to be a run-and-gun. We expected them to be a poor man's USC.
Yep.
And instead, they've turned into like basically what last year's Oregon State was.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, again, just hats off to that coaching staff. If you're an Arizona fan, you have to be extremely pleased with that hire. And you got to start thinking about how many truckfuls of cash can you load in his backyard to keep him staying there. They're favored to win this game. Who knows how rivalry games go, if it's going to be close or a blowout. It's still like we talked about earlier, right? It's tough to say. It's why in that situation with Oregon State, we said, hey, they're good enough to take all those points. This one, Arizona State, it's a rivalry game that can hang around, but also with those injuries, Arizona could kick the crap out of them. Hard to say. And that's why we're talking about the total. So we're going to go under 51 because you're at 51 and 52 each are the key numbers. At least you've got the push at one of the key numbers. Yep. But the model thinks that we should be more focused around the key numbers of 44, a little bit 45, and 48 are the key numbers we should be more thinking about, that the defenses are going to rule the day here. That Arizona State's going to have a really hard time scoring. That if Arizona State hangs in this game, it's going to be due to their defense, and it's going to be a 17-10 type game. Yep. And if they don't, that it's not going to be 50-30, that it's going to be, more like 34-10, something like that. Under 51 here. The second total that we're going to give out, we'll give out more throughout the week, but here are the first two that we're locking in early on.
Yep. So according to Sideline, Arizona State has played 4 teams this season that have an above average defense. So if you're looking at the ratings there, any defense that has a rating of 100 or below, Arizona State's played 4 of those teams. And in those games, they have scored 7, 3, 7, and 13 points.
Yowzers.
Yes. I do not believe Arizona State is much for scoring very many points at all in this game, because that Arizona defense, like you said, may be one of the biggest surprises for me in college football this entire season, is how this Arizona defense has played. It's just been unbelievable. So don't think Arizona is going to score very much, or Arizona State is going to score very much. And Arizona, they have scored. But generally when they've scored, it's because they have had to, or they have, especially as of recent, you mentioned their pace has gone down and everything. They have scored whenever they've had to have scored, or the other team just kept turning the ball over. And so that is possible, Arizona could win this game something like 42-10 or something like that. But I just think there's a lot of different ways this number goes under, especially when I think Arizona State may only score 10 points.
Or may not even score that many, right? This is one where a team total under might be a good way to look because there are a lot of ways the game can go, and it's just hard to see many of them where Arizona State, gets up to 17 or something like that. And again, it could go, like I said, it could go 42-10, or it could go 49-3, right? I mean, you never know in a rivalry game exactly how it's going to play out, but if nothing else, this Arizona team's just been a lower scoring team and great defense, and the market I'm just not sure is caught up with the fact that Arizona State's defense is decent. Their offense is terrible. And Arizona's strength is their defense, which, again, not what we would expect coming into the season. But here we are anyway. Hats off to them for a fantastic season. Going to look forward to hopefully backing them in whatever bowl, back when we can play more reasonable odds. We like to stick with our money lines there. We know the part of the pool we're playing in there with the probabilities. And I have to assume we'll back them in bowl season because we're really high on this team. But here, the way we're looking to back them, if you're looking to back them specifically, is an Arizona State team total under, but we're going to play the full game under 51. Again, a key number. Team there. If it goes to 52, maybe even drop another half unit on it, because now you've got even under and even another even key number. We're pushing another key number. Cousin Jared, 7 p.m. Eastern. This Baylor season mercifully will begin to come to an end. The model has finally realized what we have said for most of the season now, that this Baylor team is truly terrible. Their offense is bad. Their defense is worse. I don't know what else to say about Baylor other than on Study Hall. And again, you can watch that if you're with us on Dub Club, where Cousin Jared and I will discuss every single college football game again this week. Sign up link in the show description, $5 off your first month. I said, if you're going to play Baylor, you just got to take the money line. If you're going to play TCU, maybe try to find an alternate spread, like a 17 or a 20 or something, because this might get ugly. And Baylor hung around and kept it close for a while, and then it still got ugly because
the wheels came off.
The wheels came off, just like it has all season. We're going to back West Virginia. Cousin Jared, steep odds on this one, for sure. We've taken a lot of dogs. Minus 258 is the kind of safer route to go. Again, we've talked about this on the college basketball show as well. Talked about it on this show. There's a cutoff in the coding where if it is 7 or more, we'll lay the points. Otherwise, we take money line. We're right there. Honestly, I wouldn't lay 6.5. I wouldn't lay 7. I do the exact same thing I said last week. I'd be looking for an alternate spread because I think West Virginia might win this game running away. I think Baylor season's over. They know it's over. They want it to be over. I don't think they want to be there. They don't look like it, at least. They haven't looked like it in quite a long time. There's nothing to play for. I think it might get ugly. So if you're gonna play this, I'd put a little money line against the official pick, just because I have rules that are coded in for our official stuff. So I'm not having to think through every single game, which is a lot to do. But also play a little bit of the line at 6.5 or 6 or 7 or whatever. But also maybe look at an alternate spread if you have that capability, because I just can't see this not being ugly. Baylor hasn't competed in a long time against a team of any talent. Competed against Houston and lost in overtime. Houston is nowhere near as good as the West Virginia team. I know that one game was close, but you've seen Houston in other games struggle, and this West Virginia team is decent. And the decent teams have destroyed Baylor. I think West Virginia's about like TCU. They're both decent. And I don't see why this is not another 20-point shellacking, if not more. If my theory is right, that these Baylor kids are just done for the season. So with West Virginia, we generally like to talk about how they play a lot better at home than they do on the road. But if you look at what they've done on the road this season, okay, they lost at Penn State, which I can't remember if that was a neutral site game, but doesn't really matter. Losing to Penn State, not a big deal. Beat TCU at home. TCU is a better team at home. So chalk one up in the win column for West Virginia there. They lost by 2 to Houston, a game that they controlled until there was about 4 minutes left in that game. It felt like Houston didn't have a chance to win. Then Houston hit the Hail Mary there at the end of the game. They beat UCF on the road, and they lost to Oklahoma last week on the road. So I would say that they played Oklahoma pretty well. I believe didn't they have a 2-point conversion to win the game?
Well, 2 weeks ago, no, they got blown out.
Oh,
but
wrong Oklahoma game.
Yeah. But yes, yeah. Anyway, so West Virginia has played fine on the road this season. Had some good wins. Game they should have won, then a couple of losses to some really good teams. Baylor at home, woof.
Winless against real teams.
Yes, Baylor winless at home against real teams. And
yeah, we're not counting Long Island.
Yeah, and West Virginia is a real team. Yeah. And so I just think that, to your point, Baylor, season's over. Let's just count down the clock, keep an eye on it, ready for the season to be done. And West Virginia, somehow, if you would have told me before the season that West Virginia could potentially have 8 wins on the season in this Big 12, I would not have believed you. But here we are. They could potentially finish as high as, I don't think they will, but they could finish high as tied for second in the Big 12. So yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. I'm impressed with what West Virginia has done this season. But again, West Virginia, real team. Baylor, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's really that simple. And This is definitely the week 2. You got to be looking through and seeing who's playing hard for their coach. The answer to that question, I think we probably won't know a lot of for a lot of teams. So a lot of it's, baseless speculation. The one area that I feel a little better about, and this is not, again, as we always talk about, I wouldn't play something off of these spots, but it might take me off of a team. The one counter to that is the team who had higher expectations. And there aren't many of them that have been like this. But you know what one was last week? Was USC. Last game of the season had higher expectations, and you saw what happened there.
Yep.
Baylor's one that absolutely had expectations of at least 6 wins, if not 7 or 8. And was that realistic? Yes and no. We knew that some Big 12 teams would struggle. We knew sometimes would beat each other up, that the schedule was too daunting, that we talk about the lack of depth in the SEC and the Big 10. And that's more about just your schedule. Like, did you get the wrong schedule in the SEC or the Big 10? You're hosed. You just can't win enough games. And you're going to lose. You get the right schedule, it might bounce better for you, right? In the Big 12 this year, we kind of knew that wasn't going to be the case, the middle was the strength of the Big 12 and not the top. And so, we knew that it could be Baylor that just couldn't quite win all those games, but they did not expect to get embarrassed the way they did. I mean, this is one of the more disappointing teams this entire season. I mean, how many others off the top of your head can you think of that's been as disappointing as this Baylor team?
Well, not
USC.
Yeah, maybe, but I feel like that's a different level. Like USC was disappointing and still won 8 games or something.
Right. They had national championship hopes, playoff hopes.
Yeah. But I would almost say the most damning thing about Baylor is even in the games they did win, they had to come from down a bajillion points to UCF on the road. The odds of that happening again, very slim. And then they beat Cincinnati by 3 points, which Cincinnati,
who's the other really bad team in the Big 12.
Yes, exactly. And so even more than their losses, I think just looking at their wins, there's no game you can point to and almost feel like you took anything positive from that game.
Utah be the only one, and they didn't really even deserve to be in that game. That was just an ugly. That one was almost like the Utah UCLA game where it's like nothing was happening and someone had to win.
Well, and I would say at the time we thought that was something, but now the more that we know about Utah, Utah's still a good team, but just not the team that we probably thought they were at that time.
Yeah, just another situation here where the disappointingness of this Baylor season finally coming to an end is a good thing. I just cannot. They might be the team that has had the largest fall from what we expected to where they are, which will wrap us up here Saturday night. I'm not really sure why this game is in primetime, but here we are. Charlotte and South Florida, a coin toss game according to the model. 2 terrible teams. Charlotte slightly better on the road. Charlotte's offense against South Florida's defense is going to be miserable against miserable. South Florida's got a little bit of a pulse on offense. Charlotte's got a little bit of a pulse on defense. Charlotte seems like a team that's still playing hard for their coach, and that matters. I don't know about South Florida as much, but I know that there's a lot of talk about Poggi there, Poggi, however you say it. they like playing for him, and so that at least gives you confidence they're going to give it a good effort here. Plus 195, just way too good to pass up in what's a coin toss or maybe close to a coin toss game. South Florida maybe should be favored, but not quite like they are because they're just not a good football team.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And I would say the Charlotte defense has acquitted itself as very respectable for AAC standards so far this season. You see that ranked the number 84 defense in the country. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing for me in this game because South Florida's defense is so bad. Now, Charlotte's offense is bad too, but we're going to find out. Is bad offense stronger than bad defense in this one? Because I really don't I just can't imagine with what I've seen from South Florida on defense this year that they're going to get more than 3 or 4 stops. And I think that Charlotte can get 5 stops. And I think that is going to be the difference in this game. I think Charlotte will be able to either get one more stop or force one more field goal than what South Florida will be able to do. And so, I think this is going to be a 1-score game. I don't know how points translate to the money lines or whatever, but plus 195 for me. That I think a game is probably going to be decided by a field goal or 4 points, something like that. A really close one. Plus 195 just does not seem like it's right, especially against the South Florida team that I literally don't trust to stop anybody at any time.
Yeah. And I'm going to give you a counter to that. What if it plays out the opposite direction where both of them struggle to score, a la what we saw 2 weeks ago against Temple? That Temple's offense was so bad, even they couldn't score against South Florida, but Temple had a good enough defense to stop South Florida enough, and that game went 27-23. And I think we could be looking, like you said, at a 45-41 game or a 27-23 game. I'm not really sure which way it goes, but even in that one at home, South Florida was only able to beat Temple by 4. Right. And honestly, I think Charlotte's probably a little bit better than Temple. If not, it's close. And that was a close game. And so, yeah, if it's a tight game like that at the end, give me plus 195 every day of the week. Or again, if you want to take the points rather than the odds. Again, as you talk about balance out in the long run. Because, if it's that sort of tight contest, any one thing is going to change the outcome. And whether it's the high-scoring version or the low-scoring version, the South Florida team being favored by this much over anybody seems pretty absurd, given in the last half of the season, they've won 2 games by a combined 7 points against Temple and UConn. And that's not exactly encouraging.
Right.
If you know what I mean there. Yeah. Cousin Jared, that is our show. We have kept it just under an hour. Like the good old days, clocking in right at 50 some odd minutes. Parting words for the viewer.
Join us this week. Again, I said it on the basketball show, college basketball show. Never been a better week to be part of Dub Club. Lots of good content for a week there where there will be plenty of sporting events. And hopefully you get some extra time off to either watch us here on YouTube, listen on whatever podcast platform you may enjoy listening. Lots of good content. Good week to consume it all.
Absolutely. And again, there's that QR code and the link in the show description. Say $5 off your first month. Otherwise, this will be our last long episode of college football. We will be back next week. We will cover a conference championship. I haven't figured out the exact specifics, but we will be back again in our same bat time, same bat channel, just different bat length. Or maybe the same bat length because that'll be all the games. But we, again, a little bit of a different situation moving forward, but we will be still covering bowls and conference championship, but we'll not be able to quite pick through the games like we have now. It'll be a little bit of a different scenario. So keep tuning into those. NFL show as well as we improve to 9-0 this week in the NFL and all the college basketball content as well. Lots of good stuff. Lots of other places that we will see you around.